Okay, hey guys, so this is a 1972 Chevelle SS gauge housing, or gauge set housing. And you might see right next to it that there is a reproduction dash housing here. Okay, hey guys, so this is a tabletop tech discussion, and what I've got here is I have a 1972 Chevelle SS gauge housing, or gauge set, off a Chevelle we're working on. I'm sure you'll see that in other postings on the site. But what's happened is over the years, and I'll admit through removal of the dash, we broke off a number of pieces of the old dash housing, and when I say we, I think it's happened over the course of time. You can see the piece is quite dirty, and so what I need to do is replace this dash housing, and you might see right next to it that there is a reproduction dash housing here. Not factory original. If you notice, the factory original does have a black front on the gauges, but it also has a blue or green back, and the reproductions do not have that blue and green back on them. So what we're going to do is through a few steps here. Number one, we're going to clean up the gauge set so that we're not working too dirty. Going to take the brush to it and some towels, and ideally get it cleaned up. Number two, we're going to disassemble the pieces of this that will come out and that will transplant to the new housing. So a little bit of a job, and I thought it was worthy of spending the time here on the channel for it. If you see beside here, what I also have is, because the 72 Chevelle that we're working on, while it is a true SS, it did not come with a tachometer, so it had the lower grade gauge set. As you can see, if you look closely, you'll see just lights for what the upgraded dash would have had gauges. And what we have is this blank space, and we're going to replace that with the aftermarket tachometer as well in the process. So stay with me here, and the goal will be to get that going. All right, so we're going to start with the cleanup first, and to do that, I'm going to move some of the new stuff out of the way. And I'm just going to give this a general once-over with a little bit of air first, and then with this CRC electronic cleaner, which is made for connections, but it'll, I think, serve quite well for just giving this gauge pack a general bath. So let me go to that, and let's see where we get. Let's hit it with the air first. Okay. I don't need to clean up the old housing too much because it's the old housing, and we'll be replacing that. So I'll be exercising some care here as we're cleaning up the new areas. All right, the good news about this stuff is it dries very quickly. It's made to dry quickly on electronic connectors, and the nice thing about it is it rinses and dries pretty quickly on this as well. Let me give the front a scrub just to be gentle. And I'm not going to do any polishing on the plastic at this point. What I'm going to do with the plastic is I may work it through a little more later once we come back and get closer to putting this in the car. But the first step here was just to get the housing together. All right, so that's the clean the housing piece of it. Well, I got some of the big crumbs out of it, let's put it that way. All right, so when you look at the housing like this, the first thing that becomes obvious is there are little pegs with what appears to be rivets holding the plastic on the front. And what we want to do is get the plastic removed so it's out of the way. And so what I can do, ideally not to break this in any meaningful way, is I'm going to grab a screwdriver and see if I can gently nudge the plastic off of the post. And that one's off, and that one's off. I'm going to try to do it gently. 50-year-old plastic is not exactly your friend when it comes to prying and popping things off. Okay, there's that one. Looks like it was some cement of some kind. I think the cement is as old as the plastic, which makes it easy to deal with, I guess. But really, really careful here because I do plan to reuse the lens. There's that one. There's that one. And this one's already off. All right, and we're going to gently raise it from its spot without bending anything more than it has to be bent. So I'm stuck there. All right, it's coming free. And there you have it. So there's the plastic. I'm going to set that aside, and we're going to get on to the next section of this. I'm going to use my air to blow any of those pieces off of here. Of course, some of them just blew into the back of the gauges, but hopefully we'll be able to fish those out when we get to the next step. All right, well, one of the aspects of this gauge pack is the headlight switch and the dimmer is built into the gauge pack itself as well and sitting in the housing. So one of the things we'll need to do here is release the headlight switch from, the headlight switch handle from the headlight switch in the back. And typically on these GMs, I'll try to see if I can get you where you can see it. There's a button in the back that if you reach your hands into it and press the button, you can, and I'm going to press it with my index finger here, you can remove, you have to maybe fish with it a little bit, but you can remove the headlight rod like that, the handle. This handle's seen better days. It's actually quite sticky. Even though this gauge pack has been inside in a climate controlled area for a while, the rubber there is quite sticky. So I'm going to set that aside, and then we're going to go to the next step. Now, the next step in dismantling this will be removing the headlight switch, which it appears to be threaded. It has a threaded piece over the top. I've seen lots of different Chevys, lots of different ways that they're done. I'm going to take a large screwdriver here, and I'm going to just, again, gently see if I can turn. Well, it's not going to be big enough to to turn that piece. So I'm going to have to get a little more creative. It looks like something that a coin or something like that might fit. All right, so all I did was reach across the workbench here and grabbed a piece of metal. It's a, what would you call that? A connector strap that just happened to be in the shop here. So what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm removing the light switch, and I'm just going to use this. It's a nice piece of metal that fits that slot well, and I'm just going to slowly thread that off, with my care being I don't want to actually hurt the plastic cover, because that's got to come with me. That did not get replaced with the housing, and so I don't want to scrape that or cause any problems with it while I'm unthreading this nut from the front of the headlight switch. So it's coming off pretty nicely, and what I will remember as I'm doing this is what orientation the headlight switch is, but I have a feeling I'm not going to have to worry about that, because as you see here, it's keyed. So it has a small key in it, which I suspect is to avoid any problems with the headlight switch turning while the dimmer's being used, which, as you know, is part of the function of the item. So there's the headlight switch. Again, 72, look at that, it says made in USA. It's always nice to see. 72 Chevelle. I'm going to move that over here by the plastic, set it out of the way, and then I'm going to look at how to dislodge, if possible, the plastic cover that goes with the headlight switch, which is right here. And this being my first time, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go. So allow me to just see if a little bit of light prying on it will help move the, yeah, there's one. That one's not too excited to go. That one's not either. Oh, that's got cracking written all over it. So I don't want to break anything. I might save that for last and see what's underneath. So, so there we have it with the removal of the headlight switch. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start removing the electronic holders and the like from the back. So to be on the safe side here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the outboard light bulb holders, so that the printed circuit board, which is what this item here is, it's a printed circuit board circa 1972. But I want the printed circuit board not to get stressed or stretched or otherwise while I'm moving the pieces of the gauge pack around. So in this case, the gauge pack has two outboard sections that are threaded separately into the housing. So one on the right, one on the left. And I'm going to disconnect the light bulbs first from those, and then I'm going to likely unthread the centerpiece next, so that it comes off of the housing, and then I'll unthread, unscrew, and remove the outer pieces so that they come out of the housing. Thing to keep in mind, I suspect I will have to take the entire printed circuit board off, because I am replacing the tachometer. I should say placing a tachometer in. But the thing to keep in mind with this is we have to be very gentle. It's old technology. And one of my main concerns is I want to do less harm than good. So now let me work through taking off the bulbs and removing the outbound pieces. Let me pause here and say a couple tips if you're doing this kind of thing at home. Parts trays, magnetic parts trays, are the best thing ever for doing work, whether it's big or small, but especially when you're dealing with small electronics like this, and when you have mitts the size of mine. So I use the parts trays. I guarantee you, next time you go to your favorite hardware store. Otherwise, they're probably somewhere between $3 and $6 each, and it's always good to have a few around. Now I'm going to take these housing nuts off and start to remove the outer housing. Just a typical 1/4 inch socket, and I'll remove those now. There's our gen light. We'll have that ready to go after a little cleanup. Go to the other side here, do the same thing. And just to demonstrate how totally soft and brittle, I should say, this housing is, I think I've just broken every screw loose on it. So they are very, very challenging. So I'll have to take a pair of pliers, or probably just my fingers here, and unthread the temp and oil lights from that piece. There we go. So extremely brittle. This could show you that whether or not I had a broken housing before I thought about putting a tachometer in, I was likely to have one in doing that job anyway. There we go. All right, so there's the temp and oil lights. All right. So looking at it now, I think I will remove the full set of bulbs and remove the printed circuit board, really for safekeeping. What I'll notice here is I've got 2 printed circuit board locations on the that are threaded with nuts, and that's for, I believe, for the fuel gauge, which is what it is right there. And the rest are the bulbs, and then these 1/4 inch screws, which you've already witnessed me take a few out of there. So why don't I move through that fairly quickly. It's a little challenging to see, but what I'm doing here is trying to remove the 2 nuts on the fuel gauge. That one finally broke free. And ideally, I'm trying to do it without putting any stress whatsoever onto the printed circuit board, because I suspect it's as brittle as anything here, and I am going to be as gentle as I can be in removing it. Well, that was a little close call. A second. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is gently work this circuit board off of all of its perches, and I'm going to set it aside. So that's a good look at the printed circuit board. We're going to set it aside in the same orientation that it was in. So now we're down to the overall housing itself, the main part of the housing. And right now it looks like that's held in place with about 5 of these small 1/4" screws. I've already demonstrated that the housing is very happy to break free when I put any stress whatsoever on the screws. So let's see how that goes. Yeah, and what I'm seeing is the housing was already broken. So even where it was torqued into place and had not had a chance to move due to the removal from the dash, it already had cracks and the like waiting to happen. So you love to have those original parts in these old cars, but the truth of the matter is sometimes the original parts got to go. Two more. And the last one. I guess I could offer myself bonus. Nope, there it goes, first thing. No bonus points for not breaking off the plastic in the screw. So once again, if you're working on one of these, I would highly doubt that you'll be able to remove these without breaking the underlying plastic. I'm sure there are some tricks if you were working as a true restorer, working to try to preserve everything. I can imagine some heat or something like that. But there's our gauge cluster, and that's what's coming out of there. So we're going to give that a shot. We're not going to get these wet at all. We're going to give it a shot of air in order to hopefully provide a little bit of dust removal. But in the past, I've worked on older Chevys, and in the past, the advice I've got is don't get any water on anything because it will remove some of the paint, or if I'm not mistaken, some of the numbers from the odometer, and we certainly don't want to mess with the odometer on this car. It is a very sparsely driven 1972 Chevelle. So let me stop there for a moment and get myself ready for the next. But there you see the green and the blue insides of the OEM gauge housing. Okay, so what we've got now is we have the housing out, which includes the 2 main gauges that were actually in the gauge pack that came with the car. And the step I'm going to take now is to remove this blank from the back of the housing here, which, if you'll notice, the housing is actually metal, so I don't anticipate a ton of problems. I'm going to remove the blank and see if I can fit it through the hole behind me. And then what I'm going to replace it with is this ShiftWorks tachometer. So my goal was to include a tachometer with the car. We're making a few subtle upgrades to this car as we're working on it. I'm sure you'll see that separately. The ShiftWorks tachometer includes all the electronics. I'm not going to go into that in this video because we're focused on the gauge housing. But the bottom line is it's wired and ready to go. But what I'm going to do now is remove this blank and replace it with the ShiftWorks tachometer. And there we go. And it does indeed fit through the hole appropriately. And so that I'm not gonna say discard. I hardly ever discard anything that goes to a classic car. I'm gonna place that over here by the housing. And then I'm gonna do a little fit up of this tachometer to the housing and see where we stand. It should slide through just as well. And it does. And let's see how it's gonna fit. There we go. Well, I'm gonna say right now that it looks like it's going to fit properly. I'll have to double check my work with the housing here in a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and put the screws on it and at least have it ready to fit up. And I'm not going to go for Gorilla Tight on these. I'm going to go for just gently tight. I don't want the housing to bend, and I certainly don't want to strip a screw in this 50-year-old housing. All right, so let's take a look. That's where we stand. We've got now fuel, speed, and tach. Next we'll be working to reassemble the housing, in this case using the new housing right here, and we'll be working in reverse. All right, so the next step here is going to be setting up the housing, placing it on top of the center gauge pack, and doing the reassembly. I'm going to give each piece a quick shot of air just to make sure that I'm not introducing any unnecessary dirt to the inside of the gauges. Well, you can see a few things flying around there. I'm just popping it a little bit. And then I'm going to place the gauges, once again, gently into the housing and do a quick fit to see how we're doing. Back on it. What I'm getting is a little bit of interference from the tachometer. I'm going to take a moment and set this here, and I'm going to borrow one of the screws here for just a moment. I believe the screw came out with, I'll double check it, but I believe this is a screw that came out. Nope, it did not. So in the removal, it appears that I had one more screw than that's required for the additional tachometer, and so I'm going to use one of the existing screws in that hole and see if we can hold it in place a bit better as we're assembling it. And once again, just working to keep it as firmly in place and not flexing as possible, so that we can then place the housing without too much, or excuse me, the gauge pack into the housing without too much stress. There's that piece. There's that piece. Okay. So I'm going to place a couple of the screws in, and I'm just going to work them in there as a temporary measure to see that we are fitting up okay. So let's take a look. I need to put one on the bottom just to be sure. And once again, I'm placing these screws into plastic, and they are self-tapping, more like sheet metal screws, and I don't want to mess that up, so I'll put one on the bottom here just to hold it in place so I can show where we are in terms of progress. Well, I say that, and I need to make sure that the bottom is actually in place. And you can see here the bottom of the housing has to snap inside of the metal, which is what wasn't happening when I was upside down. And so now it is, and I've got screws aligned, and I'll place a screw here. If any of you are curious as to why I'm not using a nut driver on a handle for this, the truth is I've misplaced my 1/4-inch nut driver, and that's the story. So I decided I was going to have to go with sockets today while I was doing this project. once again, gentle, just to fit up. All right, so that's the bottom. All right, I have to keep the wires out of the way here. And let's take a look. Oh, it looks quite nice. So there's the fuel speed tachometer now. Pretty excited about that. I'm gonna flip it back over and work through the reassembly of the balance of the center housing and getting the printed circuit board back in place. Okay, and now it's time to work on the printed circuit board. I'm gonna, once again, hold it in the same orientation that it was in. There actually are a few cues that would probably not allow you to place it incorrectly. One being the connector location cut into the back of the metal on the center housing. But I just wanted to see, and this is what I was anticipating, I wanted to see the fitting. So what's gonna have to happen here is the wiring on my new tachometer is gonna have to come through the hole there. So we'll give that a second. I'm gonna keep the circuit board off and go ahead and place the other outside housings in place and work on that. And then we can finish with the printed circuit board. But I did wanna know how much interference there was gonna be from this big chunk of wiring. So let me work on these two for a moment. These two housings, that would be the lighting housing. I'm gonna pop each one with some air just to make sure that I'm not introducing any more dust under the cover than I should. And then I'm gonna place these in place. Just to check progress, there's the temp and the oil. And next we have to put in the gen light. Interesting that the 1972 cars still had a gen light, even though they were running on alternators for quite a while at that point. And there's our progress with our gen light in, and the balance of our gauges now aligned and in place. The next step I've got is I need to give this a wipe down to make sure, again, I'm not leaving any or too much dust on it. I'm going to do that on both sides, and then I'll come back and work through the printed circuit board and the light bulbs. Okay, so here's where we are with the gauge housing. So I've given it a quick once over and wiped off some of the more egregious dust, if you will, from the housing. And then I gave it a shot just on the towel with some contact cleaner. Once again, I'm using this QD electronic cleaner from CRC in order to make sure that as I'm replacing the printed circuit board, I am not introducing any bad contact. So the next thing is going to be the printed circuit board. So I know I've got to thread the package here from the new tachometer into that circuit board, and then we'll start to attach it as it was before. So here we go. There's the circuit board, and I'm going to run gently because, again, I want to be very careful with this circuit board. I'm going to run these electronics through the circuit board in some order here. There we go. All right. And then there are a set of small screws that were holding the circuit board down. I'm going to start with those, and then of course finally what I need to do is replace the two nuts that were attached to the fuel gauge. I say finally, that's the final set of hardware to attach here, and then I have to replace all of the bulbs. Once again, trying to be very careful not to tear or even just barely nick this circuit board, because it is original and I don't have a replacement at the moment. And I just found it. So I was one screw short. I mentioned earlier that the housing appeared to need one more screw, but I believe that I just found a reason is because I removed one screw during the removal of the printed circuit board, and that was also holding the housing on. So there was one, and we're replacing that. Just for reference sake, it was the lower inboard screw on the tachometer side of the gauges for anybody that is truly scoring at home and trying to repeat this job for themselves. Let me turn this and let you see the last couple. Okay. And then, as mentioned, the last couple here are the two nuts that are on the fuel gauge. I'll try to do that where you can see it. One and two. Okay, so let's take stock for a moment. We've got the circuit board in place. We've got most of the cleaning done. I've got a little bit of dust here that I probably could take care of. And we've got the gauges all positioned properly on the front. So the next step will be to replace the bulbs. I'm going to take a time out for a moment and get those positioned properly, and then we'll replace the bulbs. All right, so here's where we are. Each bulb in a gauge pack like this comes in its own holder, and I'm going to go out on a limb and just visually inspect to make sure I don't have any broken filaments. So that's going to involve just dusting them off very quickly and then replacing them. So what I'll do is take a quick look. I'll dust them off, make sure I don't see any broken filaments, and then I'm going to go ahead and replace them with a quick pop and twist. All right, so what do we have now? Well, we've got the completed dash, housing with the gauges inside of it, and we've got the printed circuit board there. The next step is I need to get my headlight switch back in place. That's going to go right here, and as you'll recall from the beginning of the video, it's keyed and ready to go. And then the last step in this will be to replace the plastic. The headlight switch, as I showed you before, is actually keyed. I'm not going to spend a ton of time cleaning it up. It's actually surprisingly, if I can get a good view there for you, let me see. It's surprisingly clean. The resistor coils there typically can rust up, but you can see all manner of trouble. But this car has not been driven much and has been taken care of over the years, and so I'm just going to give it a quick spritz like that. Let it dry for just a moment. I'm going to take the handle, give it a quick wipe. The plastic is in bad shape, so it looks good, but that is very sticky. So I'm gonna think it acts as if it's had some solvent or something on it, but I don't believe that to be the case. It's, I think, just old. So I'm gonna give it a good wipe and then probably hit it again and wipe it down in the, to see if I can get some of that stickiness off. But the first step with the headlight switch is to take the nut and remove it, and then align the switch into the keyed hole that's on the bottom here. And when I do that, I'll then ensure that we place the handle in. Now, what I do remember very well, and this will, obviously the key makes it easy, but this button, which is the button I pressed to remove the knob, was inboard of the switch, and so I know that that switch is going to go that way. And this ground strap, I don't yet remember where that goes. I'm sure somebody in the comments can tell me where it goes. I have to go consult a wiring diagram in order to get that right, but we're going to place it there because if it started there, it's probably important, and I don't remember what the connection itself was. So I'm going to roll this over. I'm going to keep that key and that ground strap in the right place, and then I'm going to place this nut into there in the hole and begin to tighten it up. See if I can get that actually where you're watching. I'm going to take out my trusty iron strap here and give it a little bit more of a persuading to tighten, and then we're going to call that good because this job does not call for gorilla strength. All right, and then we've got the handle for the actual switch, the knob itself, and to put that in, you just give it a little shove, work your button in the back here with your index finger, and bingo. And we've got everything working as it's supposed to again. Now, what I noticed I did forget, and I'm going to take a look at it now, is I did not put the plastic on here, and I have not replaced the plastic across the rest of the gauge set. Here's that plastic. I'm going to clean it up a little bit, but the reality is I have found that working too hard to polish this stuff creates more problems sometimes than it's worth. But I'm going to clean it up a little bit and then place it. The other piece is the plastic that was around the headlight knob, and I need to check on that. So let me take a quick break, and I'll come back. All right, so here's what we're working on. You can see on the old housing. This is the old housing. You can see the blue and green. The headlight switch has this plastic piece around it that I guess shows you that it's the lights, and mine's probably seen a little bit better days. However, if you noticed at the beginning of the video, I started trying to pry it off and stopped because I was concerned about stressing this clear piece. So now that I have the housing disassembled, what I'm going to do is actually work on the backside of the piece, and I've got a punch, and I'm going to just try to lightly punch the piece of plastic out of its housing here, just using minimal force, but working it through so that I believe I can put less stress on the actual piece of clear plastic this way. So we'll see. You'll see me make a bet here that I'm doing it. I may use a little cushion. I mean, a paper towel is never bad, but I'm going to give that a little shot out. Felt like that let loose, and I'm using just minimal pressure, kind of building to the point where, well, until it breaks. And there you go. So I was about 50% successful, let's call it that. So what you can see is this is a a piece that has a few small studs. There's one example with the old housing piece still on it. I'll break that loose. There's the stud, and I broke one of the studs off. One of them's about half broken, and there's a third. I think I can get away with a little bit of cement on that, and to use it for this new housing. I'm not too concerned about it. I suspect with a Chevelle, that'll be a piece I'll probably have to pay about 50 bucks for, but I could replace it if I wanted to. So what I'm gonna do is clean that piece up, just give it a few shots of this. This will make it nice and cold, and then I'm gonna just place it around the handle there, the headlight knob, and we'll be done with this piece. So once again, I have to remove the headlight knob from the back, which, as I've showed you, I'll press my index finger on the knob, remove the knob, and then place this piece in here. It, I guess, ideally is glued into place, but I'm just gonna place it in place right now and let it hang, just as I am with the overall gauge pack, which will go this way. Gauge pack lens, I should say. Pardon me. Let's see, I'm upside down. Once again, it'll go this way. Boy, it's been a rough day. So there we go. And then we'll use some contact cement to put that in place. Once that's in place, we'll have a complete gauge pack. All right, so let's take stock of what we did. We took the old 1972 Chevelle housing. We removed it from, removed the gauges and the lights from that, and we replaced it with a new housing, and we added the aftermarket tachometer to the gauge pack. So how do we do it? Well, we use the tools you see in front of you. I used a 1/4 inch ratchet, the CRC electronic cleaner. I used a little nylon brush. I used needleless pliers, a, what was it? 5/16 wrench, a punch, a screwdriver, and a little bit of air to clean things up. Looking pretty good. I've got a little bit of work to do to finish up the cement on the lens and the other plastic pieces, but we're gonna call it good for today. Thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed the video.